It comes in some fairly standard packaging. It's not fancy, but it's quality enough to protect the lens. Inside is a leaflet, some foam padding, and finally the lens itself. The lens is small, but I can tell immediately that it has a solid metal build. The focus breathing is definitely noticeable, but it's not as bad as I've seen on some lenses. I think this level is perfectly acceptable for a budget lens. All of this footage is part of a commercial collaborative project between myself, Cody McIntyre, who's the skateboarder you see on screen, and Captive Creative Studios, who own the studio that we are filming in right now. When you have a wide open aperture at a medium to long focal distance, it's extremely soft. But once you get close, it's actually reasonably sharp. In just a few moments, I'll show you guys some sharpness tests at higher apertures. But first, here's Justin from Captive Creative battling for an old school skate trick.
I landed it. I'm gonna see it.
Yeah. Now for the sharpness test. At 0.95, this is ridiculously soft and has ridiculous levels of halation as well. I would only use this in a pinch. At f1.4, it is still not great. It's really soft and you still get this like halo hazy effect around any of the contrasting edges. At f2, we get our first usable range, in my opinion. It's not particularly sharp, but at least it's not a ProMist filter on steroids like we got at 0.95. At f2.8, f4, and f5.6, this is the sharpest that the lens will be. It's still not clinically sharp, but it is definitely at least functional. From f8 to f16, it does get a bit softer, but at least you don't have the halation going on. But you will probably have to crank up your ISO to counteract the lack of light. This right here is the minimum focus distance. It is basically right sharp on my left eye, but not on my right eye. So if I move just like a little bit back, just like that, I'm fully out of focus. And if I move just a little further back, I'm almost entirely unintelligible. In this shot, you'll notice that there's a red cast across all of the green in the image, and that's because this lens has significant chromatic aberration. Like all the red that you see popping up in the middle of the bokeh balls in the background, that doesn't actually exist there. That's just the lens refracting light in some imperfect ways. This issue is most pronounced with fine edges like these cactus needles and strong background light sources. Although you'll notice that the light sources themselves don't suffer as bad up close as they do at a distance, where the center of those bokeh balls has a very clear red circle that doesn't normally exist. Now this shot is crazy, and here's why. I am filming at 4K 120 frames per second with a 180 degree shutter at ISO 400, not ISO 3200, not ISO 12800, ISO 400. Even under bright streetlights like this, that is absolutely insane. This means that slow motion has become a real option for nighttime shooting when normally it would not be. For reference, here's the same shot at 24 frames per second, 180 degree shutter, 400 ISO. One issue that I've also noticed is that there's a significant amount of haze that pops up if your backlight is significantly stronger than the lighting on your subject. Like in this case, you can see that there's definitely a haze that is there that's not fog, that's just the lens. You'll also notice that the lights that are in focus look yellow versus the ones out of focus look red. That's the chromatic aberration we were talking about earlier. So this is another good example of a situation where the lights behind me, if I didn't have a very good depth of field, like very deep depth of field, would be really, really tiny and a whole lot less interesting. But now they highlight me as a subject. They kind of like make me stand out on the image in kind of a weird and dynamic way. But again, if I were to go and try to sharpen it on the merry-go-round itself, really, really tiny. And if you get in really close, it actually ends up like blending together in this kind of cool, like rainbowy kind of way. So it just ends up being like a lot more interesting than if you didn't have that deeper depth of field. This is my parents and I at a local Christmas show / carnival. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to test out the lens and get some cool footage. For this last section, I went to my friend Taylor Jett's skate shop in Katy, Texas, because I wanted to be able to try using a dynamic moving subject to test my ability to track focus using this lens manually. I am pretty experienced when it comes to pulling focus, but I'm gonna be honest, this was pretty challenging for me. A very small amount of movement on the focus ring meant a very long focus throw on the actual image itself, which means that tracking a subject dynamically with precision is extremely hard. I wouldn't personally recommend doing this in any situations where it wasn't easy to just try and reshoot the shot. So for the rest of the session, I busted out my Laowa 15mm rectilinear lens to capture the rest of the tricks.
So who is this lens for? This lens is not for you if you're going to primarily be filming a bunch of action. I'd say that if you're doing landscape photography, it's also not going to be the best lens for you because at the far end of the focal spectrum, it is pretty soft. There are much sharper lenses available in this price range if you're primarily looking to focus in at a distance. Probably also going to be a struggle if you're doing like live events and that sort of thing because again, this is a lens that leans into being able to control your shot. So if you don't have a second chance at being able to repeat that shot, I'd say this is probably not the best lens to be utilizing for those kind of environments unless you're just an absolute master at focus pulls. So who is this lens for though? What are the positives here? This is incredible in low light. Like I can shoot in environments I had not expected to be able to get good, clean, low noise shots in at night. I'd say that if you're shooting at medium to close distances for stuff like portraiture, this is actually not a bad starter lens for something in that tangent. It gets you that deep depth of field that's so popular in the portrait space without having to jump into high-end lenses to do that. I'm actually pretty excited that I bought this. Like for the $200 that I found it for, I think it's normally $250, but it goes on sale pretty often down to like the $200 price point. I think that it's worth every penny for the right person. But yeah, before I go, guys, Captive Creative. They're the guys who helped me film that whole intro at the beginning of this video, which would have been impossible without advanced cinema robotics. They have a premier studio here in Houston, Texas. It is huge. They have LED volume walls. They've got the camera robots. They are fully decked out for commercial production. I'm going to leave a link to their website in the description down below, but they are seriously very good when it comes to commercial production stuff. Dudes, thanks so much for tuning in. It has been a hot minute since the last time I've posted here. I'm just going with the flow at this point. Whatever I get interested in posting, I'm going to post whatever's interesting, and we'll see where it goes. Until next time, guys, I hope you're doing well. I hope you enjoy the holidays and the new year. Take care, and I'll see you soon.